All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on healthy aging priorities for the G20 in India. I'm Aranima Himawan. I'm a senior health research lead at the International Longevity Center. And we're really delighted to have a great group of speakers with us today to really share their thoughts on the barriers and opportunities to healthy aging in India under its G20 presidency. The key reason why we're holding this session today is because ILC plans to engage the G20 in India this year as part of our global prevention program. And last year, we actually held a high-level House of Lords roundtable to discuss what could be our priorities for engaging India and the G20. So this is another opportunity for us to share our plans and to hear from other experts on this topic. Our plans are to, following this session, to share a short policy document which will highlight what our key sort of focus for the G20 will be. But I think it's a really great opportunity for us to really identify opportunities, what are the key barriers, and how we can actually work together to really see commitment on preventative health and healthy aging. So just a few words about our prevention program. Our program is, we're developing a global index, and I'll be talking briefly about this index shortly. With really the key aim for us is to engage the G20 and the world really on what needs to happen to support healthy aging. We plan to publish this index, which will be an online tool next month alongside the World Health Assembly, and we'd be delighted for all of you to join us as well. Before I sort of start our presentations, I also wanted to thank Hallmark Foundation for the opportunity to hold this session, along with Pfizer, Sanofi, GSK, MSD, and Amgen, who have supported our Healthy Aging and Prevention Index and then have made it possible. A couple housekeeping rules. At the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat function to communicate with panelists and virtual delegates, as well as a Q&A feature where we will be collecting questions for the panelists during the sessions. So please do submit those throughout. You're also invited to post comments on Twitter using Delivering Prevention hashtag and at ILC UK. This webinar is recorded and will be published for public access on our website and our YouTube channel. Can I have the next slide, please? Great. So as I was talking about our global prevention program, this 4 years ago, and it really came from this very clear sort of understanding that there's not only a health benefit for investing in prevention, but there's also a very clear economic benefit to prioritize prevention. And what we can see here is just looking at the G20 and those aged 50 to 64, there's a $1 trillion productivity loss as a result of preventable conditions. So huge losses to the G20 global economy. On the right-hand side, you can see a breakdown of what the conditions that actually contribute to this productivity loss. But what we also know is that many countries aren't investing enough in preventative health. Across the OECD, only 2.8% of their health budgets are on prevention. But when we're talking about investing more in prevention, we're not talking about huge increases. We're talking about very small increases, such as a 0.1% increase in prevention that could unlock an additional 9% of spending every year by people aged 60 or over. So huge benefits for investing in preventative health. Next slide, please. Great. So our Healthy Aging and Prevention Index is a global index that holds governments account on healthy aging and prevention. The index measures and ranks 121 countries on 6 healthy aging metrics, and this includes lifespan, health span, work span, income, the environment, and happiness. And we've chosen these 6 because we've identified these as what matters most to governments and what matters most to individuals. So for the first time, this index really brings together health, wealth, and societal metrics to really give us a comprehensive picture of how sustainable countries are in the context of longer lives and the extent to which governments are investing in efforts to prevent ill health. Alongside this index, we are also ranking political and economic country blocks, including the G20, but also EU and OECD and a few others as well, to really give a way for us to kind of demand action at the global level, as well as at the national level. Next slide, please. Fantastic. So this is just a sort of peek at our index. And what I have here are the top 50 countries. As you can see, the UK is ranked at 16th. India is not included in this top 50. They rank at 102. But this gives you a sense and an idea that actually, a lot of the countries that benefit from, from healthy aging interventions tend to be at the top of the index, and they tend to be sort of your European countries. And they also tend to be countries with very, very small populations. The top 10 only account for 1.1% of the global population. So huge inequalities when we're talking about individuals that actually benefit from healthy aging interventions. Great. So here is a breakdown of the G20. And as you can see at the bottom of the right hand, you'll see a little arrow, and that shows how India is doing across the 6 metrics. Some of the ones that will probably stand out to you the most is environmental performance and happiness. Of course, there's huge improvements that need to be made, especially with the environmental performance indicator for India. But what we can see in the global ranking is that countries that rank directly above India are Niger and Rwanda, and countries that rank below are Central African Republic. Namibia holds the same rank as India, and the reason for this is the way that we've developed our index. Countries with the same score are also ranked ranked as the same. But this just gives you a little bit of an overview, and clearly there is, a 10-year gap between life expectancy and healthy life expectancy. So, and I think a lot of countries do see that gap. So narrowing that is obviously a key area and key priority, I think. But there's also lots of different things that can be done to really support healthy aging, ensuring that people can live not only longer, but healthier lives. And this can also help them to work for longer. Next slide, please. Great. So I just wanted to finally just end off by saying that hopefully during the session, we'll be able to hear from all of you on sort of what, to understand better what it is that we want to be doing, what we want to get out from our G20 engagement. But I'll leave it to Esther now, who will be able to talk more specifically about the work that we're doing. So Esther has joined the ILC in November in 2022 as Senior Health Policy Lead. Before this, she worked with a team of palliative healthcare researchers at the Cicely Saunders Institute of Palliative Care Policy and Rehabilitation, alongside her master's in public policy at King's College London. In this role, she supported the delivery of research projects into aspects of palliative care and rehabilitation, and she greatly enjoyed working with researchers and patient involvement groups. This is how she became interested in questions of longevity and good health at all stages of life, and the policy interventions that could support these objectives. Esther holds a law degree from the University of Kent and has previously worked in child protection as a legal assistant and for the National Center for Domestic Violence, advising survivors on their options to obtain protective orders through the civil courts. Esther, over to you.
Thank you, Erin. And thank you to our panelists for being here today. And I'm really excited to hear your reflections on what we've got to offer so far. So as Erin said, I'm the new health policy lead at ILC, and it's really great to be taking this opportunity with the few years that we've just had and to go to these huge events and meet these very important and interesting people and promote preventative healthcare interventions. So if I could have the next slide, I can walk our panelists and our audience through our 3 key priorities for the 2023 G20. The first is shifting perceptions. So we're very clear in our circles that prevention works. Investing in prevention is the key thing that we're seeking to achieve. And we know that health and wealth are inextricably linked. So, for example, where I'm sitting in London, we know that from borough to borough, there are different outcomes according to wealth and opportunity in terms of healthcare outcomes. So from one London borough, you may have distinct life expectancy from a neighbouring London borough, for example. And we see this in India, and we see this across the world. Health and wealth are inextricably linked. So with the creation of the G20 Health and Finance Task Force, we already know that perceptions around health and prevention are shifting. So this task force has begun this year and has a draft plan in the making, with the mandate of contributing to and strengthening global health architecture for pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. So clearly this mandate is particularly relevant to infectious disease, but as we've seen in Aaron's work with the index and in a lot of our lives personally, we've seen that prevention is so key to non-communicable diseases as well. There are some interesting reflections on how investment in prevention is perceived in a similar vein to the climate change debate. We know that it might transform a lot of the ways we live, work and spend if we were to prioritise prevention in the way that we are asking. But the longevity dividend in terms of all us living longer and the opportunities that we could unlock if we did invest in prevention could be enormous. And this is shifting perceptions is really the first step to outlining what is possible through prevention. We don't want people to be unwell through communicable and non-communicable diseases. And the people we're hoping to reach at the G20 are in a position to invest in that and really move the needle on that issue. So the next is investment. So as Aaron said, we are asking for a 6% figure of ring-fenced health spending for preventative health interventions. Many current countries currently spend less than 3% of their total health budgets on preventative care. And as I've mentioned, the longevity dividend of doing so could be enormous. As we have growing populations and those populations are living longer, we are hoping that more of us, as we live more years, more of those years can be healthy. So at this year's G20, the first meeting of another group called the Disaster Risk Reduction has already taken place. So this working group presents an opportunity for countries to perceive risk and investment differently. So I was at a meeting, an event put on by the All-Party Parliamentary Group in London this morning, and there was discussions about how we're changing mindset. So investing in things that we may not need, like vaccines, is not, money thrown away, it's insurance. So there's real interesting changes we can make in how we perceive public spending, resourcing, and how we perceive risk as well. So the third, if we go back to the past slide, thank you. The other key focus that we'd like to bring to the event in the G20 is the reduction of health inequalities. So COVID-19 exposed and amplified the health inequalities that I've mentioned across countries and across societies. So targeted strategies are required to reach these underserved communities and incorporate community members in decision making. This is absolutely necessary to addressing inequalities of access, and it isn't straightforward. We need concerted effort and investment in reaching people who may not, who are currently not served as we would hope they were by their health service. So these inequalities can be evident by age, gender, ethnicity, nationality, locality. There's a whole broad spectrum of characteristics that we need to be taking into account when we're dealing with these inequalities of health that prevention should strive to meet first and foremost. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So as Aaron mentioned, we have done some really high-level work in the G20 in the past. So in 2019, the ILC UK put on a very successful side event in Japan entitled Prevention in an Aging World. The speaking panel was comprised of high-level stakeholders from the Ministries of Health of the UK, the US and Singapore. And it was really promising to see G20 leaders in that year commit to a much needed focus on prevention across the life course. And obviously that was 2019, and we all remember what happened in 2020. So the COVID pandemic was disruptive to many of the promises that have been made and the actions that have been committed to in 2019. And yet the pandemic underlined the need, the desperate need for preventative approaches to healthcare and the maintenance of good health. So broadly, since this event, we can see that action on longevity and healthy aging has lagged behind where we might expect it to be. But 2023, as we're exiting the pandemic, or what feels like exiting it anyway, this is a real opportunity to draw lessons from the past few years and reevaluate where we go next. So alongside what I've already covered about previous G20s, the G20 in Osaka declared that aging populations and demographic change presented a global risk, requiring a combination of fiscal, monetary, financial and structural policies. So this is drawing together all of the different strands of the work we're doing at the moment. So ILC, of course, is a longevity organisation. We are a life course organisation. So our vision for prevention at the G20 this year is a solution for a lot of different problems, particularly the problem of demographic change. So the importance of healthy aging to an active society it's really key. So the next piece of information that is useful to the context here is an OECD paper that came out of the 2019 G20 and emphasised the importance of a life course approach, and employment working groups started to take up the mantle of prevention to a higher degree, but we need this reflected particularly amongst finance ministers and those who are able to invest the funds that are desperately needed. So the next thing I will outline here is the opportunities that are presented by India's presidency this year. So of course, India is a developing economy and may well have overtaken China in terms of raw population. You know, there's a different estimates coming out at the moment about, you know, where that population lies. And our discussions so far have led us to conclude that although people perceive India to be a very young country, the problems of demographic change and the opportunities of demographic change are presenting themselves, you know, really acutely in India. And I'll be really interested to hear our panelists' reflections on this. We know that in India, nearly 1 person in 5, so 20%, was aged 50 and over in 2018. And this is set to increase to 1/4 of all people in India will be aged over 50. And adults aged 65 and over spent on average 30 more hours volunteering than people at all ages. So the opportunities at the G20 are to use India almost as a case study, we would say, as to a society at the sharp end of demographic change. What is possible here? What lessons can we draw? And where else do the opportunities lie? So can I have the next slide, please? Oh, sorry, can we go back? Thank you. So our work thus far has led us to 5 key areas of change that we're looking to investigate, and I'll outline them briefly here. So we're looking at India's economy, their employment, income inequality, health, and the role of formal and informal care. So those are the key areas that we're going to be looking at in our policy brief. And I would like to pass over to our first panelist to discuss the last of those. Thank you so much, Anil.
Thank you, Esther. I'll just quickly introduce Anil first before he takes the floor. But I just wanted to say, I think one of the key things is that we know there's certainly an appetite at the G20 for investing in prevention and healthy aging. There is that commitment, and we've seen that all the way back in 2019. But now we really need to see action, and that's where I think there is that we still need to make that happen. So hopefully this year, this is what we want to achieve and actually see, increased spending on things like preventative health and, actual demonstrable action on supporting healthy aging. So thank you for your first sort of comments on that. And we can, of course, come back to it during the Q&A session. But for now, I would like to introduce Anil. Anil has over 25 years of experience in the international development sector as a veterinarian, development practitioner, grant maker, and trustee. Anil established carers worldwide in 2012 using his personal experience and passion to transform the lives of unpaid family carers in low and middle income countries, acting as a catalyst through a partnership approach. Currently chair of the Structure and Funding Working Group of the International Alliance of Care Organizations. Anil's work and its huge potential for social impact have resulted in him being the recipient of several awards, notably an International Ashoka Fellowship and the AC EVO Fellowship, which recognizes inspirational and emerging leaders in the charity sector. So Anil, it's great to have you here today. It's over to you.
Thank you, Arun, and thank you, Esther, for inspiring and presentation. If we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for recognizing the role of family caregivers in supporting healthy aging. So next slide, please. Who are these unpaid family carers with whom we have been working? So this is a very, very broad definition we use, particularly in low and middle income countries where there is no financial transaction takes place. Of course, there are paid caregivers providing the services to family members, whether it is home-based nursing care or at nursing homes as well. In the low and middle income countries, carers are invisible, they are isolated, they are vulnerable due to caring responsibility. They don't have the opportunity to meet with other members in the community. So it is having a huge impact on their own health and well-being, as well as financial impact. Even though they have the skills and experience, they can't participate in income generation or livelihood activities. Next slide, please. So there are many issues and challenges are faced by family and carers. So particularly, as I mentioned, one is due to caring responsibility, there are two adults are losing the income, one person being affected or needing a support, that individual is unable to go to work, and of course carers as well, and having a huge impact on their health and well-being and reduction in social contacts. And there are so many young carers caring for either elderly parents or grandparents. So because of that, they are losing the educational opportunities. Next slide, please. So I want all of you to just spend 30 seconds on these slides. Earlier, Arunima has given us healthy index figures. Here is a statistics from India, actually. If you look at India, has a population of 1.4 billion, and it has statistics about every conditions and all. According to United Nations Population Fund 2020, represents that India got 116 plus million people aged 60 and above, and that number is going to triple in 2050. And have got so many people with mental illness and people with dementia, all of these adults and children, all of them have a carers, but we just don't know how many carers are there because carers are invisible. They are hidden behind the curtain, and it's not part of the questionnaire in the part of census data. On the contrary, UK has 6.5 million carers. 1 in every 8 adults are carers. And the contribution made by the carers in UK is 193 billion saving to economy. Because of that, there is a strong case has been made. The UK has Carers Act. A significant number of carers policies are there, and many carers are receiving the support, whether it is respite care, short break, carers allowance, home adaptation, all kinds of things. If I apply that statistics to Indian context, there is going to be minimum 134 million carers will be there. So no one is recognized. That is a conservative estimate. If you do the proper survey, that number will be huge. And WHO also talks about by 2030, there is going to be 400% increased in need for carers in low and middle income countries. Friends, what I'm saying is literally we are sitting on a bubble. We don't know when that bubble is going to burst. It is a time for us, all of us, to think about how can we strengthen the family structure, family system, or come up with an alternative caring arrangement within the community. Because I know that in India, only 7% of the families are using the professional caregiver services, and majority of caring is done by the family members. So it is important, how can we recognize the critical role family carers are playing, supporting them, improving their health and well-being, thereby improving the quality of care. Next slide, please. So in the absence of statistics, we done some survey, particularly in the elderly case, and there was a study done in the Indian Journal of Gerontology in 2019. 37% of carers are having a psychological distress, anxiety, and depression. 43% of carers are having physical health problems without treatment. This is in the elderly population. If you look at mental health and disability, there are also older population, 60 and above. If you take into that number, it goes up to more than 80% of them. And everybody is worried about financial, and there is no respite support or a short break opportunities for family members to care. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, there is a crisis in care due to increased life expectancy and combined with the changing population structure. For example, India has got more and more nuclear families, smaller family sizes, and the reduction in extended family living. If you look at 25 to 30 years ago, we had a concept of joint family, extended family. People used to live together, support each other in this community. But now it is more and more nuclear family. Children are moving out for employment opportunity, education, and good health facilities. People who are left in the villages are elderly people. They themselves need help, assistance, and support. Sometimes they are burdened with caring for a grandchild. To some extent, they don't have a choice. They have to, because they're relying on the children's income to support their day-to-day living. Next slide, please. Again, majority of there is a huge discrepancy. Is there majority of carers are women? 84% of carers in South Asia are women. Particularly, some of the countries carers worldwide is working. India, Nepal, and Bangladesh, as high as 97% of them are women. Next slide, please. So it is so important to include carers or partner in care. There is a care receiver, whether it's the elderly in this situation, and there is a carer is there, and third one is professional is there. The role of carer is not just to meet the need of the care receiver. They are also human beings like you and me. Like we talk about the rights of elderly. What about rights of carers? Carers are asking. Yes, they are very proud to be caring for someone they love dearly. It is important to recognize the critical role, vital role they are playing to improve the care receivers' health and well-being, making sure that they are well taken care of, and the professionals' advice is implemented. Whatever the skills and knowledge or information they have received are implemented appropriately. The role of carers plays a significant here. So what I call is a triangle of care or a partners in care. So please do recognize within the family members, uh, if carers are providing such vital role, just ask simple questions to them. How are you? Do you need any help? Just give them 1 hour of support. Let them go out and have a fresh air or spend time with their friends. That would make a huge difference. Next slide, please. So with that background, Carers Worldwide was set up 10 years ago. We are the only organization exclusively and strategically not just raising awareness about the needs of family carers in low and middle income countries, but also providing the support to carers. I started with just 250 carers to begin with in 2013. Today, we have transformed the lives of more than 150,000 carers in 3 countries, India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. Next slide, please. We have a very ambitious vision and mission statement. We want to see every carers are valued and their needs are met. In the mission statement, it doesn't mean we are focusing on carer, doesn't mean that we are not interested in care for individuals. The role of care has emerged because of the care for individuals' need. So it is important to create that equanimity between those two individuals. Next slide, please. So we act as a catalyst to change not just the attitude in the community or in the family, but promote support for carers. And building the evidence, using that evidence, engage with the policymakers, lawmakers, and inspire the systemic changes in the countries where we are working. Next slide, please. So I have come up with this is the simple, cost-effective, scalable model where we are identifying the issues of carers and providing carers support to them systematically, strategically, and it has been a transformational. To reduce carers' loneliness and isolation, we have promoted more than 800 emotional support groups for carers. That is, for the first time, carers are feeling that I'm not alone. There is a hope is there. There is somebody is interested in my life as well. And 91% of carers are participating. If they were not getting the benefit, they wouldn't have participated. Second is we are addressing their health, whether it is physical, mental health issues, emotional issues, family issues, relationship issues. More than 400 carers have been trained in barefoot counseling. They are the first point of contact in the villages to meet with other carers in similar situation. And the third one is we created an alternative, innovative way of community caring centers where carers have 5 to 6 hours of respite or a short break, not the overnight stay, but during the day, there are 2 adult carers are caring for elderly or children with disabilities or person with mental health issues. That is giving them an opportunity to attend social events and also sometime to go to work and earn an income. And the fourth one is, as I mentioned in my statistics, many of them are struggling with financial difficulties. How can carers earn an income or family members earn an income along with the caring responsibility? So these are home-based activities. We were able to assess carers about their skills, expertise, what is it they want to do, and how we can facilitate their employment and training. And today, more than 80% of carers are earning an income. And final one is we created a platform. We have the platform for everyone, like elderly platform is there, women's platform, children's platform, but not for carers. We created platform in the countries where we are working at a district level, state level, and national level, advocating for carers' rights, advocating for the recognition of a carers' vital role, advocating for these services for carers. Today, we have more than 15 of such carers organizations have been promoted, and 2 carers cooperatives in Nepal. Next slide, please. So this gives you an impact in terms of our intervention before and after the. This is an independent evaluation was carried out, and as you can see clearly, the number of families living below poverty line before our intervention and after the intervention. That is a significant body of evidence we were able to build. And last year we commissioned, looking at our model in 3 countries, every pound investment in carers worldwide, the return on social value is nearly £8, so which is quite higher than the charitable benchmark. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned that we are building evidence and engaging the policymakers and making that so that there is 6 systemic changes we are able to bring, because our whatever we are doing is still a drop in the ocean. So how are we doing? We were instrumental in bringing 2 landmark policy changes in India in such a short period of time. One is Rights of Persons with Disability Act, another is Mental Health Bill Act 2017. Both those 2 acts recognize the support to caregivers. And we are also an advisor to some of the state governments in India. So through our advisory role, we are able to make certain recommendations to provide the support to caregivers. I'm delighted to share with you all that for the first time in the history of India, Karnataka state and Tamil Nadu state, 2 states in southern India, are providing caregivers allowance. Although it is a small amount, but a great recognition and financial count, particularly high dependency care. Not all carers, but high dependency care. Next slide, please. Yeah, it's whatever I have talked so far is like a common sense. It's not rocket science. Our intervention is like a drop of ink in a bucket full of water. You don't need a whole bottle of ink to change the color. So really, this is something everybody can do within the family, within the community, to recognize the vital role family carers are playing and appreciate, acknowledge. Next slide, please. So one of the realization I had last 10 years is it doesn't discriminate whether you are rich or poor. It doesn't discriminate whether you are an actor or astronaut. It doesn't discriminate whether you are president or prime minister. It affects each one of us. One other day, we all will become either carers or somebody will be caring us during our lifetime. So if that is the case, why isn't it part of Sustainable Development Goal? I'm delighted that ILC has developed the Healthy Aging Index and recognized importance of role of caregivers. So using celebrity status and various other opportunities, we are trying to increase the visibility. Next slide, please. So what is our call for action for particularly G20 this time India is hosting it? So friends, as I made a strong case why carers are so important, why their role to be recognized. So there are 4 actions need to be taken. One is there is a significant awareness need to be raised within the family and the community among the lawmakers as well about the importance of family caregiving and provide education, training, and family caregivers. So particularly on healthy aging and caregivers' skills and self-care strategy. And the second one is providing support and resources to family caregivers, particularly on advocating for their physical, mental health issues and emotional health issues as well. And the third one is it is important to develop policies and programs that not only recognizes the critical role of carers, but supporting the role of family caregivers in providing the older adults, particularly having flexible work hours and having the tax incentives. And as I mentioned, the social security benefit for family caregivers, not in all states, but only 2 states happening. Hopefully, slowly that can be replicated into other states as well. And final call for action is expanding access to professional caregiving services for older adults who do not have a family caregivers. So it is important to have the healthcare services or assisted living facilities, even the nursing home, which many family can afford cost-effective nursing home services. Next slide, please. So my call for action is please invest in community care and support and recognize the importance of informal care and the formal care, the people who are providing it, as Arunima has mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. Friends, these are our learnings. It has been quite an exciting journey, challenging journey. What I'm going to make our learning is for healthcare systems, caregivers are the unpaid army keeping everything going on. Without caregivers, our health system will collapse. Please do recognize the importance of a carer's role and appreciate and provide the support to them. To service provider, there are many service providers are there. They are the potential catalyst to therapy success. To doctors, carers are expert by experience. They may not know how to read and write. They may not have gone to university, but they do know how to care for their loved one, turning the treatment plan into reality. So please recognize that critical role. Finally, for millions and millions of elderly or a patient, they are indispensable. Mother, father, husband, wife, brother, that make each day possible. So next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you for listening. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the International Longevity Center UK. I noticed that the Hallmark Foundation is one of the charities supported your study in Arunima. They also supported our work in India. We are grateful for their support for our work. So I'll be more than happy to take any question in a Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I think you've made it so clear, the important role that caregivers have in supporting our older population, but also it's a huge part and component of healthy aging and preventative health. It has, ripple effects really. And I think, I was particularly struck by some of the statistics that you shared. But also, it was good to hear that there has been some advancements, particularly around the carers allowance. That's a clear, example of acting and recognizing and valuing the role that caregivers have. So I would like to now move on to Dr. Ritu Rana. She is a medical graduate with specialization in public health and an expert in healthcare administration from FMS Delhi, with more than 2 decades of experience in healthcare. She has been associated with WHO India and the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, as a technical support, and worked on at various national health programs from conceptualization to implementation. Dr. Rana is an empaneled national trainer for elderly and palliative care at NHSRC and is a certified trainer for integrated care for older people from WHO. Currently, Dr. Ritu Rana is leading Mission Health at Help Age India and providing technical and strategic leadership for the healthcare of the elderly. So, Dr. Ritu Rana, it's delighted to have you here with us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Arun, and thank you, ILC, for inviting Help Age India to talk about the healthy aging and the issues we can look at the G20. Though my former speakers have talked about something related information on the health of the elderly in India, but I would particularly focus on what are the elderly status in India and what we are doing and what can be done further. Please, next slide. Just one slide about the Help Age India. Help Age India is an NGO which is more than 4 decades, and the mission is to work for the cause and care of disadvantaged elderly, with the vision that there is a society where every elderly has a right to be active and having a healthy and dignified life. Next, please. So talking about what is the elderly situation in India, so there are estimated 138 million elders in India, and as you said, that this number is going to be double in 2050 as per the WHO. And we all know that people from the disadvantaged background with fewest resources and few opportunities are likely to have the poorest health and the greatest need. And this is what the developing countries has, including India. Next, please. If we talk specifically, I already said that there are 138 million or 14 crore elderly in India. 50% of them live below the poverty line. This is as per the socioeconomic census started in 2011. And 90% of them has to work for their living, and in an unorganized sector, because they do not have after the retirement age, or some of them have not even worked in the organized sector entire life. 60% of them suffer from health problems, including majorly the chronic diseases, the non-communicable diseases. There are more destitute widows because the women outlay men in longevity, as we have seen that the health life expectancy of age of women is around 71 years now, and of men is 68 years. So the women are outlying, and so there are a lot of widows now, the destitute widows in India. 55% of the elderly actually face some abuse from their kin and the families, so which is some of them is not even reported. So this is also affected by the loneliness and neglect. So we have done a study during the COVID-19 pandemic on the livelihoods, income and loneliness, and on the digital divide. So this has come up in that study, so that women, particularly in the rural area, are disproportionately affected during the COVID-19 because of the issues of loneliness, neglect, unable to afford the financial issues. Next, please. So the top trends, if we see what is the top trending aging in India, is the longevity. So people usually earlier we used to say that India is a young country, but now the picture is changing. So there is the middle age and the elderly age is actually increasing. So the bulge, if you look at the demographic transition, so there is a bulge in the center now. So longevity is increasing. The feminization, as I said, that the women outlive men. There is a lot of disability. As per the last study, 40% of the elderly beyond 60 are actually having one or the other disability. There's a morbidity profile, non-communicable diseases, mental health issues. The income is nowhere. They do not have any income security, social security, and the living arrangement, because as Anil has said that earlier we used to have the joint family system, but due to the better economic these opportunities, the families are moving, and now most of the elderly are living alone by their own, where their families has moved away, not even from the cities to different city, but to the different countries. Next, please. So the risk here is for the elderly is they are left behind. They are mostly invisible and lost, or you can say the last in the line. So there is no priority as such. This is from the WHO. I have taken that every older is a person is a different. Some may have that level of functioning of a 30-year-old even at the age of 70, but others may do not have the same thing. Some require full-time assistance for basic everyday tasks, as Anil was talking about the caregiving. So health is crucial, and how we experience this health is individual to individual. And as I said, that what are the extra 20 years, as we say that now the life expectancy has increased on an average of 18 to 20 years. How do we expect the elderly or the senior people to live those years? Next, please. So this is here what we said, that earlier the life expectancy was average on 60 years in India, but now it is more 20 years more. So how they spend these 20 years is something, it depends on their health. So, and that is where we call it healthy aging. Next, please. So there was, I'm just responding to one of the question was there, that what is healthy aging, because there's a context here. So I'm just replying on that. So healthy aging is actually to maintain the functional ability of a person to the extent what they want to do, what they value to do. So this is about their maintaining that functional ability, including the physical and mental ability. So there are certain things how the health of the individual is influenced. It is by the behavior of the person. There are some age-related changes, which are physical changes as well as the neurological changes. There are some genetic diseases, because due to the aging, there are certain diseases which are they are acquiring. They do not have that secure housing, or assistive technology is required, or there are not those abled, the elderly abled transport mechanism or the social facilities to engage these elderly. So all these actually have an influence on the age of the elderly. Next, please. So this is from the last year's study, which is a longitudinal and aging study done in India. These are the major issues which elderly are facing, basically the non-communicable diseases, which are the cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, respiratory diseases, and the prevalence of these diseases are actually increasing. Also, the mental well-being is affected. So we see that in 2015, there were 4.1 million people who had some dementia in India, and it is increasing. It's not about the dementia. We have done a survey with WHO during the COVID time, and we have found that 50% of the elderly in the community are actually having the mild to moderate depression. Next, please. So there are issues in accessing the health facility or the services. Availability is also an issue. Though we have many national programs in India, and there is a program on healthcare of elderly in India, the government is doing its own, but the implementation of that is what is required to be facilitated. So the policies are there. There's a policy for older people also, but how it is being implemented is what we have to facilitate. And this is the point of a discussion during the G20 as well, that whatever the policies are available or the programs are available for the elderly issues, though these has to be facilitated on a fast movement. The availability. So you can see there is about the healthcare facilities in the rural area, in the very remote village. Especially the women is not able to avail that, because she has to travel around 5 to 10 kilometers, which is not possible for her if she is disabled, or the person, if not the lady or the person is disabled. The affordability is another issue. There is no paying capacity, and the government facilities, if so ever there is inadequacy in the human resources and the other areas as well. The government is trying to do its best, but it's not only the government can do everything. So here again, we focus on the community engagement and the community participation, where we shift the specialized task to the community person and the community engagement for caring of the elderly. And I agree with Mr. Patil when he said that carer is the something which we have to engage in. These are the issues we must be talking in the G20 for the elder issues. Next, please. So I particularly want to say that when we place our things into the G20 for the elderly issues, they are particularly the accessibility, affordability, and availability of healthcare in India to the elderly, the marginalized person, which is elderly abled, right? The long-term care is another thing which is required, because there are a very limited facility for the long-term care of the elderly. As the person ages, there are a lot of complications coming, and the person will be requiring some caring. And as the family is no more with us, the community-based approach is required. the prevention. So how can we prevent the diseases? That's what should be the focus again. So preventing the diseases, and also the promoting the healthy life. So what are the lifestyle changes can be promoted that can enable the person whenever the person in aging, how can they promote their healthy aging by adopting the healthy lifestyles? Living support is something which the community support is required. So this is what I see, that if these are the things which can be talked about and focused during the G20, we will be able to lead a healthy aging for elderly and for anybody, even before the aging, pre-senile age as well. So this is all about that. Thank you so much. I'll be happy to take more questions if there are.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your presentation. I think you touched upon a lot of really important points. And I think, the issue around non-communicable diseases, we know something like 70% of them are preventable. So there's, huge improvement that can be made. I think in India, but also, across the globe, really, we're seeing, a significant increase in NCDs, and this is significantly contributing to poor health outcomes. And many of these are also age-related. So you sort of have all these different issues, but I thought it was really interesting that you looked at the health issues and then you had alongside it also the environment. And of course, that plays a huge role in health outcomes of people. So I would like to introduce our final speaker to present, Dr. Aaron Balachandran. He is a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Maryland, United States of America, and is an upcoming research scientist at the Columbia Aging Center. Dr. Aaron received his PhD in demography from the University of Groningen, the Netherlands in 2020. He did his pre-doctoral training at the Institute for Social and Economic Change, India, and has a background in the discipline of economics with a master's degree from the Madras School of Economics, India. He worked towards population aging in Europe and Asia beyond traditional perspectives during his PhD, where he developed new measures for population aging for comparisons across European and Asian countries. He works on new measures on population aging are widely cited and has been published in reputable journals such as Aging and Society, Journal of Aging and Health, SSM Population Health, Economic and Political Weekly, and The Lancet. He has also received the Memorial Award 2019 for Methodological Innovation in Population and Health by Indian Association for the Study of Population. So, Aaron, it's great to have you with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Arun, and thanks to ILC UK, Esther, and to you, Arun, for giving me this opportunity. I want to use this opportunity for making a point that G20 and India and the world needs to rethink on population aging using new measures of population aging. Next slide, please. I'm not going to talk to this audience about an introduction to population aging in India, but I just want to start with the point that demographically, both in absolute terms and in relative terms, and also in terms of the rate of growth of elderly, India is so large. India is among the largest countries in the world. 138 million are already elderly people are there, and it is expected to grow to 315 by 2050. And as we see across the world, population aging is guided by two things: A, rise in life expectancy, and B, reduction in fertility. India has officially reached the replacement rate of fertility rate, and the life expectancy of older population in India has actually doubled over the course of last 50 years. But there are certain states and certain regions and certain sections within the population where the life expectancy and the life expectancy growth and the fertility rate reduction are very high. For example, Kerala, Himachal, Tamil Nadu, etc., have a very high life expectancy. And next slide, please. So that's about the point that I want to make. India is several countries within countries. We can find say differentials across sex. Most of the Indian elderly are actually women, and this is expected to grow larger. And differentials across region, around 3/4 of the Indian elderly are actually in rural areas. Also across geography, the southern and the western states have higher share of elderly. Sometimes it's spoken about the Indian aging, that it's ruralization and feminization, which means there are more and more rural population being added to this, and there are more and more female population being added to this. And in demographic discussions in India, the talks are always about demographic dividend and their their upliftment, etc., because of the large demographic dividend. But I want to make a point here that if you relook into this demography of India, it's actually not an issue of certain sections and certain regions, but it's actually a national issue that population aging is. Next slide, please. Okay, this is just an illustration of what I just mentioned. This is the difference across, on the left is the rural-urban difference. You can see that 3/4 are in rural area, and this is on the right is the the sex difference or the gender difference in elderly in India. Next slide. So this is the India's population pyramid, which is very common for every demographer in the past, present, and in the future. So you can see that the population pyramid is getting narrower and narrower. The population at the younger ages are getting smaller as a share of the total population are getting smaller and smaller. But the point I want to make today is this black line, which is that the way we measure elderly has been remaining constant over the years, has been same across space, across time, etc., which is the people above age 60 is what we measure. And there are additional measures like old age dependency ratio, which are all based on this idea of 60 as old age in India. This is also the recognized age of retirement by government. Next slide, please. But I want to argue that, if you look at, say, a place like Kerala in India, which is one of the southern states, and if you look at their vital statistics, the life expectancy and fertility rate are as high as some of the, as good as some of the Western European countries. And if you take, say, a place like Bihar, the life expectancy and fertility rate are very similar to some of the African countries. So can we say that an older person in a state of Kerala is same as an older person, say somebody at age 60 in Kerala is same as somebody at age, say 60 in Bihar? And I would argue no. And when I talk about the changes in life expectancies, we all know it's guided by the differences across development, differences across healthcare access, difference across healthcare utilization, etc. And what we see during the pandemic is that the difference across rural urban areas, across geographies have been widening in the past 2 years. So can we argue that in certain, somebody in Kerala, an older person in Kerala, or an urban area, or a male elderly is same as that of a female? Next slide, please. And this is where I want to argue that, the way we see age is, we see it as a constant threshold, and which is basically that everybody above 60 is very homogeneous for us. Whereas this idea of old age has to be moved. It need not be fixed. And I'll give you a small example to argue why it should not be same. In 1950, at age 55, somebody in India had 15 more expected years of life. Whereas in 2015, somebody at age 65 has 15 more expected years of life. So probably 65 is the new 55, So next slide, please. This is, so here I want to introduce an approach called as prospective age approach, which is actually a very well talked approach in Europe and other Western countries, which is an idea by these two scientists called Sanderson and Sherbo, and they redefine old age with something called as prospective age approach. So every person has two ages, which is simultaneously two ages, which is a chronological age, the number of years he or she lived, and prospective age, which is the number of years, number of birthdays he is expected to have, right? So, and they argued that if a new way to define that is probably to look at the age where somebody's remaining life expectancy is 15, and then we can have a new old age threshold. The idea is coming from the idea of inflation, which means say 1 rupee or 1 pound in 1950 is not same as 1 pound in, say, 2015. So 60 or 65 in 1950 is not same as 60 or 65 in 2015, right? Now, next slide, please. My work is on basically improving this approach for developing countries. And I argue that, with certain adjustments, we can also add this to developing countries. I can talk more about that in Q&A or later if we have time. But my idea can be said about can be illustrated in an example, which is that just as the currencies across countries are not same, old age is not the same. So £1 is not same as $1 and €1 and ₹1. So similarly, 60 in India is not same as 60 in UK or 60 in US, and similarly 60 in Kerala is not same as 60 in say Bihar. Next slide, please. Now, the advantage of using this approach is that we have a dynamic old age threshold, and we also have a life course way of understanding old age. Somebody who has taken so much earlier in their life will have a different chances of reaching old age than somebody in a later in a better position in at earlier ages. And it also sees population aging as the beginning of a new phase in life rather than as a burden. And it also recognizes that there are different old age advents across different populations. Now, I want to use this as a supplement to the existing measures of aging. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, so this is an example of that. By traditional old age threshold, that what you see on the first column, we have 60 as the consecutively as old age. But if I use prospective old age approach, which is that the remaining life expectancy is 15, if I use that approach, we see that in 1978 in India, at age 60, the remaining life expectancy was 15, right? But if you use this changing remaining life expectancy approach, by 2016, this has old age threshold nationally has grown up. Okay, so old age threshold is a dynamic concept and it's changing, it's improving in India nationally. Next slide, please. Okay, now I want to ask a counterfactual question. Look at it state-wise. Look at it across states in India. Say Kerala and Uttarakhand, etc., are the best performing states in India, and they are the right of what you see. So if you adjust for life expectancies or remaining life expectancies, what we see is that somebody aged 65 in Kerala has the same remaining life expectancy as what you see in the leftmost, Chhattisgarh, at age 57. So somebody age 57 in Chhattisgarh has very similar life expectancy today as that of somebody age remaining life expectancy as that of Kerala at age 65. So that means somebody at 57 in Chhattisgarh reaches the same remaining life expectancy as somebody of 65 in Kerala. They both have same remaining expected birth years, right? So they're planning for the so the idea of old. So I would argue that somebody in Chhattisgarh, Assam, or Bihar, they reach old age at an earlier age compared to somebody say in Kerala or Punjab and Delhi. Next slide, please. Similarly, I also find rural-urban differential. So if you take, if you look at this slide and you see that in the rightmost is the urban India, and they reach old age threshold at a later age compared to rural India in the middle. And nationally, at we have around 58 as our old age threshold. Which what I'm arguing is that somebody in rural India has lesser at a lesser age, at a smaller age, they have the same remaining life expectancy as somebody in urban India, which means rural India probably are reaching at old age at an earlier age, or reaching. I'm reaching in quotes. They are reaching old age threshold at an earlier age compared to somebody in urban India, right? Next slide. And this can also be seen across social groups, which means this is a calculation that I did based on a new study by Vyas et al., which gives life expectancy across social groups. And if you look at SC as ST population and M is Muslim population, this and HC refers to the upper caste or higher caste. And if you take HC as the benchmark and look at the other populations within India, we see that the SC, ST and the Muslim population probably actually reach earlier. I mean, even the OBCs reach old age threshold. The differences between them are not very stark, but compared to the higher caste, they are very big, which means compared to the better off caste in India, say the lower caste or the SC, STs are actually reaching old age at an earlier age if you adjust for life expectancy. Okay, next slide. Now, in my subsequent, I don't have time for that here, but I want to argue that in my subsequent papers and works, what I do is that I look at this across gender, across regions, and then I add not just life expectancy, but also say other factors of life, such as cognition, ability, disability, and ability to move, etc. And what we find is that if we use, say, a multi-dimensional approach, if we look across sections of populations, and then I also do a projection for future aging scenarios to 2050 and 2100 by different levels of education and different levels of and by different socioeconomic groups. And what we find is that if you adjust for the differences in life expectancy, differences in health, differences in say cognition, the vulnerable section within Indian population, say by gender or by region or by education and socioeconomic status, they probably reach old age at an earlier age compared to the better off. Okay, so we know that demographically India is moving. India is the last week India is officially the largest populous country in the world. So the 8% or 9% of this population is already very big. But if we adjust for also these differences, we understand that probably if you have a life course approach to things, the old age threshold in certain sections within India are much earlier than what we think. And that makes the share of older population much higher than what we actually know, which means old age actually is an issue, is a life course issue, and it's actually an issue across all the regions and all the sections within the country of India, right? And then one of the adjustments that I also do is the healthy adjusted life expectancy, which can also be done on this, which is very similar to the theme that we are discussing today. Next slide, please. So I just want to conclude that India is not homogeneous, and it's actually countries within a country. Certain regions within India reach old age much earlier than what we know already. Say the rural areas, the northern states, males or the vulnerable sections and social class within India actually reach old age much earlier. And I argue to use a life course approach to understand population aging in India in our future studies and future policies, and thus we'll understand that aging and population aging is actually a national issue in India. Next slide, please. The last slide. So, unlike in Western countries, the understanding of population in India is not limited just to the labor market reforms or pensions, because it's only 7% of the total population in India that actually have a formal work. The 93% are actually in informal sector. So, it's not this paper or this idea is not just for a reform in pension ages, and in fact, it's not at all about that, but it's more about understanding the healthcare system's long-term and short-term vision to understand that the vulnerable section has a different life course and they reach old age earlier, and thus the governmental schemes should understand these differences and use this life course approach and improve as well as expand old age benefits, which are already very low, but it has to be expanded and improved to, and probably it has to be universal, but at the same time, it has to be adjusted for certain categories within India, understanding that they will reach old age much earlier than the other categories. So, I argue for preventive healthcare policies and universal healthcare, and B, to expand this to certain sections within Indian populations to ages, and not to have a fixed old age threshold, very strict and fixed old age threshold across groups in India. Thank you for this opportunity, and I hope I can talk more about it in the Q&A. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for your presentation. I think it was really interesting to get the sort of bird's eye view of what's happening across India and the variability within the country as well. And I think that a lot of the times when we're talking about, how best can we support healthy aging at a national level, it's often, looking at which are the areas that are most need and how can we direct resources to those areas. So that certainly came out in your presentation. Just over onto Q&A. I know we don't have as much time as I think we had hoped. So hopefully we can get through a couple questions, but I encourage all panelists to respond to any individual questions that might specifically pertain to your area throughout these sort of 10 minutes or so. But I thought I could perhaps sort of kick off the discussion, sort of bringing it back to sort of the role of India and G20 and sort of the opportunities there that it presents. And there were a few questions around this idea around, you know, what are the key priorities for developing countries like India to create an ecosystem for promoting healthy aging? And how could India possibly sort of lead in, you know, promoting and investing in healthy aging? What would be sort of the opportunities that you see there? Would anyone like to come in?
So I'll start with, and maybe others can join. So for the healthy aging discussion in India, actually, the India has started, and there are, as I said in my presentation as well, there is a focus on elderly in the health, even in the ministry, government of India. The Ministry of Health has a specific program on healthcare of elderly, which is from the district level, which is a higher center, till the grassroots level, which is a village level, as I said. But everyone should understand what are the components of the program, and how the community itself can be engaged, and there should be an empowerment where they can understand the component and take the services of that. So this is one part. Yes, the spend, as I said, the funding opportunity should be there, more on the health, particularly on the elderly. So in every area, whether it is a like the healthcare delivery system, or even providing them the long-term care institution. So spending on that should be there, and here the community can also participate by providing some of their some hours, so that they want to do some community work, and engaging the community, the supporting to the elderly who are lonely. So this is how there are some certain opportunities. Maybe others can also add to it, and there are platforms where we can address these issues by learning and empowering the community itself. So unless until it comes from you see, the demand generation, unless until there is a demand generation and the community understands, so the services would be based on the demand generation. So we make them empower, we make them learn, understand the issues. Elderly must understand what are their issues themselves, and maybe then these are some of the opportunities.
Great. Would anyone else like to come in on that?
Not on that, Arunima. Just I want to expand a bit on what Dr. Rana has talked about, and also part of Esther's presentation as well. She made three key distinctive priorities for G20s. So just to adding on to that, it is important that government makes a commitment and invest in promoting particularly the healthy lifestyle, and investing in healthcare is so important. It was kind of shocking to hear how much money has been invested in that aspect from the speakers. And also it is the third element is particularly, which is close to my heart, and the work what we do as part of Carers Worldwide is recognizing the critical role carers are playing, and enhancing the caregiver support, and making sure that caregivers are playing the critical role in supporting older adults with the chronic illnesses and disabilities. So that is so important. And final point is, again, I want to emphasize on is preventative care as well, which can help us identify and manage health issues before they become serious. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And I think, you know, the point around demonstrating that case that you mentioned, Dr. Rana, as well, I think that seems to be a common theme here around really demonstrating the need for investing in aging, and the benefits it can bring is going to be a key way in which we get world leaders to really, you know, listen in and take on board what it is that we're saying. I wonder if anyone else wanted to come on that specific question, or I can make any comments around that, or I can go on to another question.
I just want to add to that point
Sure.
that, demographically speaking, India traditionally had these issues of, at the younger age brackets. And then when we are improving our life expectancy, what is followed to happen is this, say, NCDs. Somebody was asking about dementia, it's very natural for any country with improving life expectancy to have these issues. And we are talking about a large mass of populations, right? So government has to be prepared for this. And as I shown in my presentation as well, that, certain regions that we think that are actually far away from these issues are actually, are expected to reach these issues much faster than what we traditionally know, right? So this has to be the priority of governments to look at NCDs, population aging in India from a preventive and futuristic perspective. Yeah, thank you.
Right. And I think especially with preventative health, it's one of those things where you invest now, but you're not going to see the benefit immediately, but it will benefit the cohort when it is a need. So actually investing now makes sense. Ahead, sort of being ahead of that curve. Of course, many countries are behind, UK included, where we have an aging population, but still we haven't policies are not adapted yet to population aging. So India is possibly has an opportunity there to sort of address this before it becomes a much larger issue. But of course, that is the challenge often when it comes with preventative health and getting policymakers to invest in it. It can be a challenge, especially when you don't see the benefits immediately. Great. I think there's a few questions here, and I wonder whether we could touch on the questions or some of the questions here that looks at whether actually India can learn from countries like the UK, or whether we actually have to take a sort of different approach to healthy aging in India, but also I guess other developing countries. And I wonder what your thoughts perhaps were on that.
I would just jump in and say, so from before I joined ILC, one of the initial events we had kicking off our involvement and our plans for the G20 was a dinner at the House of Lords. So we gathered some high-level stakeholders, decision makers, just to see, from their areas of work and their respective expertise, what are the really key things we should think about moving forward, and where should we direct our attention when making plans for the G20. And one thing that sort of a takeaway that occurred a little bit later was obviously India is such a huge country, and you've sort of got everything from really amazing developments in technology, particularly in healthcare, that can drive behavior change and secure better healthcare outcomes. And then at the other end of the scale, there's plenty of people who are malnourished because their access to fresh food is really restricted because of the infrastructure, whereabouts they live. So there are so many lessons that can be drawn across that spectrum by the UK. But I think the key one would be the capacity for building flexible services to meet needs where possible. I think it's easy to say in the UK that there's a lot of bureaucracy and you have to wait a long time for things to happen. And that may or may not be true. But yeah, there's a key learning from particularly the response to the pandemic in India. There's different infrastructure and there's different things already in place that are much more flexible. And then on the other side, obviously the UK has a historically stronger welfare state. So a lot of the changes we were asked to make during COVID-19 were on the basis of our trust in our healthcare system. And a lot of the time, trust is foundational to behaviour change. So asking people to wear masks, take their vaccine, stay at home. So I think there's that mutual lesson drawing of how we each tackle our very unique challenges and borrowing tools from the problems that other people are having and the challenges that other people are successfully dealing with in their countries. But I'd be really interested to hear the other panelists' reflections on that question.
Yes, Esther, I must say that every country has its own challenges and own the enablers or the advantages. So one model cannot fit to all, but yes, there are learnings in each model, and with the customization of one model, which can be which has been very successful in one country, India can also look at and customize as per the need. What are the regional variations? Because in India itself, as Arun had said, there are a lot of variations. So each small state is like a small country. So there are regional differences of like the customs to languages to everything. So that's where we come in. But yes, the learning and sharing can improve the cost and also the improve the aging issues, the healthy. They can promote the healthy aging. That is a must.
Can I just make a comment to add to what Rana has talked about briefly, please? I totally agree with her that it is important to note that one size fits all solution to the challenges facing country like India, the whole caring system and different regions of the world. As Rana has mentioned, that it is important to recognize the unique cultural aspect, social aspect, and economic factor also that influence and provision. It is always good to learn from other countries what works and what doesn't work, and also what are the innovative best practices are there. And learning from those models, different models, how can one develop an equitable and sustainable care system that meets all individuals regardless of their background.
I just want to add to that, some of the discussions that often happens, across, say, particularly in developed countries around the ideas around productive and active aging, which has a very big theme on, and several measures and indices are all around these ideas of productive aging, and which normally is to extend work-life expectancy, working life, which is a theme, which is a key to improving, say, satisfaction and independency at the later ages. But this may not be completely true in developing countries like India, where often the type of work is very important, because people tend, my own work has shown that people tend to be unemployed than have a employment. Old age people take as a time off sometime. So the point I'm making is a healthy aging is a good concept and a very relevant concept for Indian context, and this is something that we can be promoted and can be recommended than the ideas around productive aging, which is all mostly around work life expansion. But health expansion should be the priority for countries like India. Yeah. Thank you.
I just want to make one point here on Arun's that the productive aging is not always the working as a productive aging. So productive aging is also when you support your family, when you support the grandchildren and all, and care for it. So we have to see from the different lens as well. Just want to make this point here.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to sort of cut it here, but it was your thoughts, and I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but perhaps maybe we can respond to them separately over email. But thank you so much for your time today. And I think really interesting discussion. Of course, we can talk, I think, quite at length at what how we can better invest in healthy aging and the role that India certainly plays in that. So I just wanted to very quickly also thank our funder, Hallmark Foundation, for making this webinar possible, along with Pfizer, Amgen, Sanofi, MSD, and GSK for their for supporting our prevention program. And just reiterate. So following this webinar, we will be launching a short policy report that will highlight sort of what our plans are for engaging India in the G20. And actually, I should also mention, before we actually go to the G20, we're actually engaging the G7 next month in Japan. So for any of you that are also going to be there, we'll be delighted to have you join us. And also we'll be launching our Healthy Aging and Prevention Index alongside the World Health Assembly later on next month. And again, we would love for you to be there and make it to that discussion. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all for joining today's webinar, and hopefully see you at the next one that we have.
Thank you.